Apologies. It seems I overestimated your ability to DM. It's funny how our judgments can take such a 180, isn't it? Well, I regret that my experience with Dungeons and Dragons had started with a group like this. But you never know. I guess you live and learn. Maybe I can use this to help me avoid such toxic experiences in the future, eh? I guess I can take this as an opportunity to be fully transparent. Curas is a terrible DM. That session was disjointed, nonsensical, and poorly made. I was legitimately surprised when I found everyone praising him. Neither he nor the campaign had made deserve such. His ridiculous stories about his ancestors and past experience are mostly complete and utter nonsense. You are such a lowly, asinine, idiotic fool. I struggle to believe how I ever actually helped you. But I guess we can't help the phases that come over us. Well, goodbye. I hope you experience the worst life has to over for all eternity. I'm almost happy you lost your job. I should probably mention that I have also despised any and all puzzle games.
Because I'm not gonna limit how you play, but don't expect special treatment if you walk that path. You'd either leave the party on your own, after which you'd roll a new character, and I'd control Edwin in a macro sense, or you'd get in a fight with the rest of the party, which may or may not result in player deaths. And even if you won that fight and killed everybody, I would likely consider that a TPK. Is there a different character you want to try?
I don't want to resort to a full open conflict. I just don't see another way to resolve this dissonance. Ah yes, because this is the proper response to have when you attempt to split yourself in the party and get mad because the DM says now you have to roll a new character. Well, that's because you split from the party. Like, what the hell did you expect him to do, bro? Come on. My name is Jacob Crow, and welcome to the Crow's Perch. Did you know that the Crow's Perch is almost at 1,000 subscribers? Yeah, I didn't know either until I woke up this morning. So if you'd like to help this little burb reach monetization, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy watching the rest of this video. Today we're going to be starting off with a viewer-submitted horror story by user Simple Logic on our Discord server. How a DM's campaign burned to ash from a manipulative power player. And without further ado, let's gather up a murder and get right into this story. Why, hello there. Before I start my tale, I would like to introduce the main cast of characters in this story. I will be referring to them by the names of the characters they played in the campaign. Names may change, but not too much. My middle school friend, Kevin Ryder, the veteran player, Kane, the problem player, Akeroy, and me, the DM of this roller coaster of a campaign. This story begins in my middle school summer days. During this time, I was a young lad when I met Kevin, and we became fast friends. Soon I would introduce him to Dungeons and Dragons, but I wasn't up to going by the book, and I still am to this day. Nonetheless, we started running many homebrew one-shots, and they were fun. Soon, however, I found myself becoming ambitious and wanted to run a long-lasting campaign. Unfortunately for me, every attempt I made at running such a thing fell flat in the end. This went on for 10 campaigns. It could be more, but I don't remember. After this, I stopped trying to run such a thing. Good move on my part. It wouldn't be until the middle of 2019 when I finally meet Kevin again at a graduation party. It was him, Akeroy, and another friend. Soon after, I met up with Kevin at college, and we discussed many ideas for my campaign, a homebrew campaign based on Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. Crow here, I will be honest, I know next to nothing about Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. I know the memes. Well, some of them. Also the fact that every main character dresses absolutely fabulously. But other than that, I'm pretty much a normie. That being said, let's continue with the video. While I was drafting the required papers, player guide, story reference, class chart, and character sheet template. At the time, the player guide was bad, and I mean real bad. Thankfully, it's better after many improvements and changes, but it will never be as good as any official TTRPG content. After all the details were discussed and the story drafted, the server came to life. The first noticeable thing about the server was that in spite of me being the DM, I wasn't the owner. This would become a problem later. Nonetheless, I held an optimistic outlook for the story. If only I knew what I know now.
I, being a young DM at the time, did what I could to respect the canon of the story, plan my additions and changes to said story, and all the while functioning with a badly written player guide, of which I wrote, by the way. Prior to session 1, I had the confusingly stupid idea to involve time shenanigans, as in this campaign was actually taking place in a parallel timeline, or time travel. Because of this, our problem player requested to be introduced later. She was also the writer for all of the roleplay that took place under my campaign. Also, my campaign initially had 3 players, but enough with the minor contextual details. I know you want them juicy parts, so let's just dig into the ice cream and get ourselves a brain freeze. When session 1 began, I had my party start within a tavern called the Leaky Cauldron, to which no one got the reference. Harry Potter, by the way. My 3 original party members were Kevin, Judge, a not-so-important character in this story, and Meeps, another not-so-important character in this story. The trio introduced themselves and had some banter until the plot began. Overall, session 1 seemed good, but I would quickly lose track of the number of sessions that had passed. Time really does fly like a crow. The next most important part is when the party made it to the Joestar Manor, which gave birth to an iconic typo by our problem player, Manoi Foyer. By that point, the party was introduced to Jonathan, started looking for the apothecary, and got lured into an alleyway. Narrowly defeated 2 of Speedwagon's men, leveled up, and witnessed Jonathan kick Speedwagon's ass. They also found the apothecary, were introduced to Kane, who was a bodyguard to said apothecary, after he shot down the door to the apothecary's place, mind you, and took a coach to the manor. As the party entered the dark and quiet manor, they started looking around, while Jonathan advanced his own plot. If you watched Jojo Part 1, you would know exactly what Jonathan was doing and what would follow. After the party nearly fell unconscious to a doorframe, stupid but funny, the party eventually found the mangled and butchered corpse of Danny, the Joestar dog. Soon after that horrifying scene, the party rushed to the foyer, where they found Dio, who promptly boasted about how he beat Jonathan at everything. Not entirely true, canonically. One attempted arrest from Jonathan, a rejection of humanity from Dio, a failed attempt at murdering Dio by the party, and some funny scenes later, something along the lines of a detective getting dragged out of the window, only for his dismembered head to come back when Kevin took a peek out the window. 2 Speedwagons existing in the same room as the party, and Judge shooting, but not killing the real Speedwagon. The party soon escaped the manor, as it burns to the ground. After that, a ripple in time has appeared, and the party is introduced to Akeroy, result of a dumb idea. Of course, after that, Judge leaves because he had expectations that I will never reach. He had an ultimatum, however. His request is that I change my system from Homebrew into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Then he would come back. It is also fair to warn you now that 2 problems were being discovered thus far. One of these problems was that most of my players were becoming too confused about tracking their own experience points. I had provided the amount of EXP gained on the player guide for each individual player at that time, and I had to simplify the system, so I did exactly that. But in the process, I made a big mistake by creating an EXP hoard for them, which circumvented a lot of the confusion, but at the cost of individual management and maybe more. I also had the bad tendency to focus on my and the player's story too much, and not enough on my NPCs, and I fear that it might have poked a few fair holes in the story I was telling. I also witnessed an instance of Mary Sue in a simple encounter of zombies on the way to Whitechapel, when Akeroy released a burst of power to insta-kill all the zombies in the path, but that pales in comparison to what would happen very soon. As we soldiered on to Whitechapel, the party was greeted by a fun festival, which was quickly interrupted by bandits. The party fought them and Meeps died, only to be resurrected by William Antonio Zappelli, who conveniently walked into Whitechapel. A deus ex machina. Stupid, I know. This was the result of my disorganization in Part 1. I cannot be absolved of fault in this story. At the very least, I did help Kane resolve his backstory with a fight against Don Dragul, stupid name for a leader of bandits who raided Kane's hometown and killed his family. Soon after some more shenanigans, like Akeroy getting captured, Kevin solo fighting Jack the Ripper, and me getting my plot organized and fixed, the party leave towards Wind Knight's lot. At this point, there really isn't many moments of notice, other than another mistake I make with Kane, when I gave him too much munition, and he was very powerful. This story is already long enough, and I haven't gotten to the worst bit of it. So our next big problem is related to Akeroy. You have heard that Akuroi was the problem player, and I have given a fair few instances of this before. But she is not just your usual brand of problem player. Problem players usually go out of their way to be edgy, too overpowered, or too much of a show-off. She was always late, and had little to no excuse for those common occurrences. She usually would take me aside at the end of each session in order to tell me the cracked up character ideas she had, but I almost never had the interest to implicate said ideas. I must admit, I've had one or two interesting ideas, but alas, they were never implemented. In case you are wondering why Akuroi is so much of a problem player when I had been pulling punches on myself, remember it can't also be absolved of fault, and why I am taking so long to get to the spicy climax. Let us get to the sweet chocolate core of our drumstick cones and finally satisfy our hunger for cringe. Akuroi gave me an interesting idea for her original character, but alas, I never thought she could pull this on me. She made a half-human, half-vampire daughter of Dio from an alternate timeline in which her stand is dormant and she herself is overpowered as heck. Not only that, but she would beg me to hear her out each time I said I wouldn't implement one of her cracked up ideas. Even writing this now, I hear that voice irritating me even after I abandoned the campaign. She whined and complained at points I don't even want to remember, and often would get off topic frequently. But, ladies and gentlemen, burbs, crows, drakes, and crabs of all ages, I present to you the penultimate reason why I abandoned the Jojo campaign. It was because Akuroi set up a pack mentality. On further explanation, OP's simple logic goes on to explain what he meant by this pack mentality. Essentially, Akuroi had slowly began to take control over the game. She began to become the biggest influencer of the party's decisions, and took control of the dialogue happening around the table. In one instance, simple logic goes on to describe a situation in where she had deviated an entire game of Dungeons & Dragons to talk about Roblox. But back to the story. The worst part was that I had no say in it at all, and it was all stacked in her favor, 2-1. And even worse was that my middle school friend sided with her. I understand that people can do crazy things for love, but this was ridiculous. Although I may have left the problem behind and finished that chapter, I still cannot help but think I could have handled it better, that I could have prevented this from happening. Was I the bad guy as well here, or is it just my guilt talking? Anywho, you've heard my tale of woe, the tale of how a 2 to 3 year old campaign burned to ashes due to one too many mistakes and a lot of manipulation. I hope you enjoyed reading this cringe, and thank you for your time. And I hope my listeners enjoyed listening to it. I would like to pass this question off to the comments. Do you think OP was the bad guy here? Do you think this could have been handled better? As for my own opinions about this, and after reaching out to Simple Logic for some clarifications, this could have been handled much better, though Akuroi did seem to go out of her way to make her stand overpowered, and went out of her way to ignore GM rulings, and even convince other players to ignore them as well. In one example, Simple Logic had pointed out how the entire experience system that was created for the campaign was thrown out the window at Akuroi's behest. But even at the end of the day, I'm not entirely sure where I stand on this. Some rules were ignored, but some of the rules were bad. Rulings were ignored, but it is also the role of the GM to arbitrate and to make such rulings. But I think all of us can agree when I say, I guess this Jojo campaign lost its stand.
Like, its footing, because when you stand and...
Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. As the crow flies.
See, it's extra funny because he also could stand the game, and